In talking about the marriage covenant, we have emphasized that it's not a contract, but a commitment between husband and wife in the presence of God. So there are three parties to the covenant. And that's what we said in part 1. Then in part 2, we started emphasizing in a very important way what are the unique features of this marriage covenant. It's a permanent union, it's a voluntary union, exclusive union, because those are part of the features of the marriage covenant. Then in part 3, we started emphasizing the importance of having good reasons to have a marriage. And we spent quite a bit of time giving reasons, 3 reasons in part 3 and 3 reasons in part 4 as to why we enter into the marriage covenant. And now we want to emphasize the fact that marriage covenant involves living and cleaving. It cannot be a marriage covenant if there has not been living and there has not been cleaving. When you talk about living, it means there are relationships that have been fast that will no longer be fast. When you are a young child, you have fast relationship is with your parents. After without them, you would survive. Then you grow, become a teenager, somewhere in your 20s or 30s. You feel you are old enough to create a new relationship. So you must leave the first relationship, leave it as being a priority, to a new relationship which will become the priority. That doesn't mean you no longer have a relationship with your parents, but it means they are no longer the primary relationship. In fact, you used to be called so-and-so's. Now you are going to be called so-and-so's. You are somebody else's possession, so to put it. And that's what we mean by living a relationship to create another relationship and be part of that relationship. What I think you mean when you talk about you are living, it means that, and if you want to know whether you have actually practicing this living and cleaving, you must ask whether you have given your spouse priority over your parents and siblings. If they are still the priority in your life, you are not in a marriage covenant the biblical way. And it will be important that you understand that you are not going to hate your parents, but they will not be the priority. If you want to make a decision, you can listen to advice of your parents, but it has to be negotiated with your spouse for that decision to be not my decision, but our decision. So you must make a decision. You must determine that from now onwards, I'll make decisions with my wife, not with my family, not with my siblings. And that will be important that every premarital session, that is emphasized, that it will no longer be I, it will be we. And that means the person you are marrying, you have to be somebody whose intellectual capacity you respect, whose wisdom you respect. Therefore, you can listen to them so that you make the decision together. And even when you have a problem, you do not run to your extended family. You start of all work it out between yourself, and that will be something that will be important for you to find out. Is that, do you actually try to sort out issues, or do you allow other people to enter into your marriage? I think that's something that will be important for you to find out and see whether you can say you have actually committed yourself to doing. Because if you don't, I think there will be a problem in your marriage. But we are talking about a Christian covenant marriage. That's what we are really talking about. And my prayer is that even as you discuss this, that you yourself are determined that's the kind of marriage you want to have. Whatever the gap between living and cleaving may be, I think it's important to understand if you want your marriage to thrive, you must leave that other relationship and accept this new relationship. That's why I've always emphasized that there must be physical living, there must be spiritual living, there must be social living, there must be financial living. You have to live in all those aspects. Even if you live in one, physically you are moved, you are now staying with your with your spouse. If you have not left financially, the other relationship will still be pulling you backwards, and that will be a problem. And I think it will be important that that is sorted out very well. So, what are we saying? Have you left home physically? Or are you still living together? How will you be able to cleave to the new relationship if you haven't left physically? Have you left home relationally? How will you be able to cleave to the new relationship if there's still pulls and twists of the old relationship? But even more important, have you left home emotionally? When you want to cry, who do you feel safe to cry with? When you want to share your frustration, who do you feel safe to share? When you are embarrassed and you never want somebody to know a story, who is this one person whom you feel safe with, and therefore you can share your embarrassment, knowing that you will not repeat the story? If that is still your mother, then you really have not left, and you are not cleaving on the new relationship, and that's something that you need to deal with. Have you left home financially? Your parents may be rich, your husband may not, but now you are no longer your parents' economy. You are now in a new economy. Are you willing to step down and financially live at the level where your husband can afford, you and your husband can afford, without keeping saying, oh, I used to have. That is gone. Financially, you are in a new relationship. You budget according to the income you have. That does not mean you will not get rich. You may even finally end up as a couple much richer than your parents. But where you are now, you have to accept it. That's part of the living and cleaving. You leave the wealth of your parents to start building the wealth with your husband or with your wife. And that will be something very, very important. Of course, the parents can very easily interfere, and they are not doing so because they don't like you. They are doing so because they love you, and they don't want you to be without a problem. For example, you are getting married and you don't have a car, and they feel like letting their car. If they're not willing to give it to you, letting will be something that will create ties. It's banged. You have to explain. Now you need to ask yourself: Can't I start again? And my parents also built from scratch. Why can't we build from scratch with my spouse? People who do not feel like they want to financially live, sometimes they even refuse to get married because they can't find somebody rich enough. Obviously, there will be no young man rich enough. He needs time to build his wealth. I think it will be important that you understand the importance of this idea of living home financially. There must be clear boundaries between your income, your monies, and your parents' monies, and your father-in-law's money. It must be clear boundaries such that you don't touch their money unless they give you. And they don't touch you. They don't determine what to do with your money unless you seek the advice. I think there needs to be clear, delineated boundaries, which your parents are aware of and you are aware of, so that you respect each other. You can meet to be friends, you can meet to fellowship, but there must be clear financial boundaries that have been set together. Even spiritually, you have to live home spiritually. You need a faith of your own, not your parents' faith. Especially those who are born in Christian homes, they can have a faith that is tied up to their mother. My mother is the one who prays for me. You need to learn to pray for yourself and pray for your spouse. You need to have your own faith, because Christ wants to relate with you. I don't know. Remember, God has no grandchildren. He relates with every child like his own. Just like your mother is God's child, you're also God's child. You can both go direct to God. So when we talk about you are living home spiritually, it does not mean that you not have the faith. It's that you are not dependent on your parents' faith. You now have faith of your own. And I think that will be something that will be very important for you to deal with. Sometimes if there is a lot of interference in your marriage by your siblings and even your parents, it may sometimes require that you leave home geographically. Go to the next town, look for a job in the next town, or go and invest in the next town and see whether that will help. However, nothing in what I'm saying about leaving means stopping to have contact with them. It just means creating boundaries. So you don't have to move geographically, because you can even move geographically, but there is a telephone, there is a whatever, and they will interfere with your marriage. So, but if you feel that is useful for you, that's what you want, that will still be okay. So it will be important to understand the Bible meant what it said, that if you want a covenant marriage, you must live in order to cleave. And that will be something that will be important for you to learn, for you to do. And my prayer is that you'll ask your marriage, might your marriage be suffering because you haven't done what the scriptures say? For this reason a man shall live. You haven't left your family of origin in order to be in your new marriage. So what you have said so far is that it's a part of creating new priorities, relationships. But so far we haven't talked about leaving your friends. I think you can't really be able to cleave well to your new relationship if your friends are still the ones who call the shots. What we then mean here is not again that you will not have friends, but you no longer have friends who do not admire your spouse. If you want to ring-fence your marriage, it will be important that anybody who is negative about your spouse is dropped, so that any friends that remain are not your friends, they are our friends, they are friends of your marriage. The man may have had his boys, his buddies. Anybody in that relation, in that group that does not admire your wife needs to be dropped. You want people who encourage you if you are really committed to this marriage. And remember, marriage, a covenant marriage means marriage for life until death do us part. So you can't really encourage relationships. You must surrender those relationships that are not encouraging to your marriage. But even those that do, you cannot be constant with them. If you are ringing them daily, please ring them once a week. If you are ringing them once a week, try once every 2 weeks. Let there be clear to them that you are too busy building the new relationship to have as much time for them. And that's really what we will be talking about when you're talking about living friendships. But one thing that must certainly be for sure is leaving all exes. I hear them being called exes. any past romantic opposite sex relationships is a no-go zone. You cannot claim to be cleaving to your marriage, and yet you keep ringing somebody who had stolen your heart in the past, and that relationship broke. You know, you are playing with the fire. Whenever your husband annoys you, you feel like reverting back to a relationship, and you feel, wow, I made a mistake. I should not have married. So, whereas the other one, we are saying you can reduce the contact. This is totally abandoning any contact with any ex relationship. It must be. You do not. It's a sign that you are not cleaving to your marriage if you are still having anything at all to do with somebody whom you intended to marry, but you did not actually get married to. And I think you need to ask yourself, what are those past romantic? I think I want to suggest 3 things in abandoning them. Number 1, please share the information with your spouse. Let them know, by the way, my teenage sweetheart was so-and-so, but I have nothing to do with him anymore. Oh, then when you remember, when I was in the university, this is who I was relating with, but I have nothing to do with him. You see, by sharing the information, you are ensuring. So the first thing is have nothing to do with them. Number 2, share the information with your spouse as a way of putting a rubber stamp that you do not want any relationship at all with them. Number 3, when they try to create contact with you, refuse it. If you want to be courteous, ask a mutual friend to tell them to stop contacting you. Don't try to talk to them. Oh, let me meet them for the last time. I want to tell him off. No. He may have emotional attachment to you. And so you'll be punishing him, because the moment you say, yes, we can meet, he thinks there is hope. So when you try to tell him it will never happen again, and he's emotionally in trouble, and it's somebody you loved him, romantically earlier, you see him cry, you see him going on his knees, and there'll be trouble in your relationship. So please, use, if they are trying to contact you, use other people, mutual friends, to tell them not to. Don't try to go on that direction. I think that will be very important. At least not in the initial 3-4 years of your marriage, and not before they themselves have found their own life partner and they are still thinking they can take you out of your relationship in order to marry them. I think that's part of what we are saying. Living and cleaving is something that you must, of necessity do. So I think what you have said so far is that life is very different in getting married, because that means you no longer live with the independence you had. You prayed when you went, you read your Bible when you wanted, your life was your own. Although you are with your parents, they knew you are an adult. But with your spouse, you become one completely. And becoming one means he has the right of intervention. It means she has the right of intervention. You can't do what you want when you want and be in a marriage. Cleaving means allowing the other party the right of intervention. So, dump all past emotional baggage, all those things that were there. Let your new spouse be your emotional partner who is going to be with you. But then you can leave. When you're doing, and living is very critical in a covenant marriage. But are you still doing the hard work of cleaving? Cleaving involves some things. First of all, is creating a mutual identity, so that you are now seen as so-and-sos. And that's why in most cultures, names are important. Reintroduce yourself now, not as Miss Karaoke, but as Mrs. Onyango. It must be clear. You cannot, it makes somebody, wow, I'm responsible here by you creating identity. And one of them is through the name. But the name is not enough. It is also through being together, standing together, sharing together in public. Doesn't mean kissing each other in public. Those are private matters. But it means you are seen together and you talk together and you visit together. You are creating identity. And it will be important to understand this is what we are calling cleaving, this idea of creating identity. You must be devoted to this new union until there is an identity. So it will happen by the way you you have a new name together, the way you walk together, the way you have things together, the way you visit together. You are creating identity. And that will be a very, very important thing. But it will also be the way you pray together. You go to God together. Ever heard of the saying, the family that prays together stays together? It will be, this is what they are talking about, creating a new mutual identity. And but it also means becoming friends with your spouse. I know you are already friends. That's why you spend time together preparing to get married. But now you have a chance of creating total oneness. And agreeing that the most important relationship next to God is with your spouse. And you need to put it ahead in every way. And the most important person you do all for is your spouse. Ask yourself, do you put enough effort until your husband knows you are taking this relationship seriously and that your spouse is a top priority, even if you do not want to be disturbed? It needs to be clear that the only disturbance you don't mind is the disturbance of your spouse. Of course, you can also agree on the rules of behavior, even you at work, how they can call, what they can do. All that needs to be agreed. But your secretary, if you have one, needs to know that all other people can be told to ring later, but not your spouse. That way you'll be communicating to your spouse that they matter, they are priority. But to do all this, since your spouse is not an angel, to do that to him or her will mean you need help from God. You need to pray for yourself that God will give you a forgiving heart and a caring heart, and a heart that is not looking for reciprocation. It's not tit for tat. You love them even if they don't love you, like we saw earlier. But all this will take God's help, and it is hard work. So you must learn how to create activities that both of you are interested in, which you can do together as part of this creating oneness and teamwork. And it's important to find out what does your spouse enjoy, and are you willing to participate with it as a way of creating this oneness. Here in management, they call it team building. There's no team that requires more team building than the team called marriage. So you are talking and learning and growing together. It will create this oneness, this part of what we are calling the cleaving process. But in one word, cleaving is simply becoming friends. That's what we are talking about when we talk about cleaving. You are looking for a way of increasing this friendship, and you are creating a level where you feel your next of kin is no longer your parent. It is your new spouse that is going to be the one. So, is that what you are doing? What are you doing? Do you have dates? Like you can decide one day in a week, if you can afford it, you will eat out as a way of reducing the time you'd have used in the kitchen. You now use with each other, talking and endearing yourself to each other. That's a message of Genesis 2:24. For this cause a man shall leave his father and mother and shall cleave to his wife. What will happen when you cleave? The end result is becoming one flesh with them. And I think that will be important. So, as we finish, the one thing that must be known is this living is by every man and every woman. It's not just the woman living, it's both man and woman living. This cleaving also is both ways. It's not that you are no longer being pursued by your husband. It's pursuing each other. It's not the man trying to befriend the woman and the woman is running away. No, there's not time for pretense anymore. Now you have accepted each other. So both the husband and the wife must put effort in this friendship. And I think that's an important thing to understand as you talk about this cleaving. It's a wholehearted commitment to this relationship. And it's going to involve every part of your being. And it's like two pieces of paper being glued together. And they are glued together permanently. It means whether you're talking about work or you're talking about your times, leisure times, you plan them together. And I think that is what we are talking about when you're talking about you are cleaving. Accepting the biblical standard of cleaving means asking yourselves, where is my husband in every decision? How will this decision affect my spouse? And remember, they make us say during the wedding, you do this for better and for worse. That means even if you can see by committing myself to my wife, I'll become poorer. You are willing to. If that's the way to be with your husband, then you take an option that affects your financial upward mobility. If that's what will help in the relationship to get better. That's the meaning of you cleave for better, for worse. And I think that will be very, very important. And so, for a Christian committed to living by the principles of God's word, you must ensure that every activity that you undertake does not weaken but strengthen your relationship with one another in this marriage covenant. And that will be something that will be important. So, we are now one in this relationship. Cleaving means improving how we enjoy this being together. Because we are not two individuals, we are one. For everything I do affects my spouse, everything my spouse does affects me in one way or another. We have now our own family. We will still visit my wife's family, we will still visit my husband's family, but we are now one unique family, distinct from the other two that we came from. May the Lord help us to understand this living and cleaving is a critical requirement of the marriage covenant. And that if you truly want to have a good marriage, it's good to take the advice from the manufacturer, the one who started marriage, the one who created marriage, is saying, live first, then cleave. If you do those two, it will help you to become one flesh with one another. It will help you to have a joyful relationship with one another. It will help you to enjoy being one with one another. And that's really what the Bible is telling us to do. And it will be wonderful that that's what you do. if you want to enjoy your marriage.